In this brief demonstration, we will cover some export settings for proper printing output. Plastic widens a bit during the 3D printing process, and 3D Coat can help eliminate this effect with some settings in the export dialog, as we will see shortly. Let's go ahead and get started by creating something. We'll check modeling with voxels, and we will start with a cylinder. I'm going to check use diameter rather than radius, and I'm going to set my height to 15 millimeters and the diameter at 15 millimeters. In the Vox Tree layer panel, because I'm working with voxels, I'm going to increase the resolution before I apply a copy of this preview object to a layer. The smaller the object is on the grid, the more resolution I need to give it should I happen to have an object with sharp edges or high resolution details. So I'm going to add one more level of resolution and make sure that I'm in add mode in the tool options panel, and I will click apply. Let's now step out of the primitives tool by selecting any other tool in order to inspect the result. I'm going to zoom in by right clicking and dragging, and I'm going to hit the W key to turn wireframe on. It's so dense that you can't even tell wireframe is enabled, but as I zoom in closer, you can see this outer mesh. You can also see how dense it is at the bottom of your UI in the status bar. We're at about 4 million polygons. Let's scroll to the bottom of the tool panel and click Smooth All, because we want to smooth these edges just a bit. When you are in surface mode, you typically don't have to worry about smoothing edges like this, but voxels are somewhat different. You're working with volumetric pixels. Make sure to turn wireframe off by hitting my W key. Now let's go to an orthographic view by clicking the cube icon or the 5 key on your number pad, and in the camera menu I'll choose a left view. Again, I can right click and drag inside my viewport to zoom in. I want to make sure that I do this outside the object. I right click and drag or middle mouse click and drag to pan. Okay, now that that's done, let's go back to the object section of the tool panel and click on the primitives tool. Let's now choose a bolt from the primitives. You can zoom out and see it. Now I'm going to change the bolt head to a round head, and I'm going to change the diameter to 15 in order to match the diameter of the cylinder. Okay. And the height, let's try 3 millimeters. Looks about right. Now I can go ahead and move it up in the y-axis. I'm going to leave unchecked the use underhead and use slit. If I want to use slit, I can choose different patterns here, but I won't do that for this demonstration. Now for the body of the bolt, I want to change that to 12 millimeters and the diameter 10 millimeters. You want to be careful about creating thin walls because it can lead to poor results in the printing process. So for our thread properties, I'm going to change the thread length to just slightly smaller than the bolt length. So let's go with 11.9 and our pitch 2 millimeters. Now I want to use this primitive as a cutting object. So in the tool options panel, I will switch to subtract. Now let's choose apply. As soon as I see a change in the primitive's history stack, I know it's been applied. I can see through the object that it's already made the cut, but let's step out of the primitives tool so that we can inspect the result. Looks great. Okay, now that that is done, we'll go back to a left view. This time I'm going to hit my 4 key on the number pad. And when we go back to the primitives tool, it remembers the last state and the last object that we used. With that done, I'm now ready to create a copy of this primitive object, this bolt. Before I do that though, I want to flip this 180 degrees. There are a few different ways that we can do this. One is to left mouse click on the widget and hold while you hit the space bar. So let me do that. I'll click and then I'll type in 180 and it's flipped. The other option is to flip it along the y-axis, so I would choose negative y. Now I'm going to move it to the side, and we want to make sure that we place our object exactly like we would want it in our 3D printing platform. To be more precise and make sure that it's planted on the ground, let's create a new layer, and I'm going to increase the resolution about as many times as I did before. And now all I have to do is hit apply. I want to make sure I'm in additive mode this time. We can now step out into another tool. Now let's come over to our layer, right click, and choose snap to ground. We could do the same thing for the cylinder object, but it's already placed by default on the ground. Everything looks good, and I believe we're ready to print this out. Let's go to the File menu, and we want to export for 3D printing. We're going to leave our settings at the default, but one change we will make is the Prevent Model Widening option. I want to uncheck that for this first example. Then we will come back and check it and export another version of it. Let's click OK. This time we'll go back and export for 3D printing, and we will check Prevent Model Widening. I'll click OK. All right, it looks like we are done and ready to start printing. The entire process took about 13 minutes per print set. Here are our two different sets. Let's try the first one. Because of the widening effect, they don't fit very well. However, the second set had the Prevent Widening option enabled, which gives us a perfect result. And that will conclude this brief demonstration. Happy modeling and 3DC printing.